Welcome to the Drunk Dietitians podcast, co-hosted by your favorite tipsy registered dietitians, yours truly, Sammy Previtt, co-owner of Dietitians of Palm Valley, and Jenna Warner, owner of Happy, Strong, Healthy. Us dietitian besties can't stand diet culture bullshit and love keeping it real. Our mission is for all humans to believe that they are made for so much more than chasing a smaller body. We are also here to share with you that food can be fun and pleasurable again. Although we're medical professionals, we are human too. We are not afraid to share our deepest secrets and how years of our lives were taken by diet culture. We started this podcast so no human has to feel alone in their journey towards food freedom. So grab your favorite cocktail.
Welcome back to another episode of Drunk Dietitians. This is a very different episode because I am not joined by my co-host, Jenna. She was out of the virtual office today. So today I had a guest co-host, someone who I talk a lot about on social media, but it is Miss Anna Crum, who is my dietetic intern, I guess you could say assistant. I've called her my bodyguard before, and just like, honestly, Anna does everything with me. I don't want to say for me because that sounds bad. Like if I didn't have you, Find Food Freedom wouldn't be in existence. So we're just going to leave it at that. You're like the behind the scenes version of me. So thank you for co-hosting with me today, Anna.
Oh my gosh, I think I rolled laughing on the floor when you called me your bodyguard the first time. But thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad Jenna allowed me to take her spot. And yeah, I just really wanted to be present for this podcast today because we get so many RD2Bs reaching out for some of these questions that we went over with Edie. And I just wanted to be here to represent and be part of the conversation. So thank you.
Of course. And I think it's, so yes, I'm glad you said Edie's name. We should probably intro her in our conversation. But yeah, so today we had on Edith Shreck, who is one of my favorite sports HAES aligned dietitians. And when I say HAES, that is health at every size. And we know that diet culture is so loud and so prominent. And then there's this sport culture on top of that. And Edie does an amazing job of breaking that down today. And I know, Anna and I are very close, and she came to me just saying, like, I love HAES and intuitive eating and everything I've learned with you. And I love sport and working with athletes, and can they be married together? And my brain was like, oh, we got to talk to Edie. Like, why haven't we had her on the podcast already? Like, this is silly. So the episode was everything I expected and then some. Edie is one of the most amazing humans. Just her character and her resilience and everything about her is amazing. So yeah, so this episode is awesome. And I love your perspective, Anna, as just being a dietetic intern and someone who, it's crazy to me that you're not a dietitian. Like, I just kind of treat you as one because I'm like, you are more of a dietitian than many dietitians I know. So, of course. And so I think this will be an awesome conversation. It'll be great for other RDs to be, or just people who are athletes, retired athletes, super athletic, anything related to sport. This is great. And so if anyone listened to our old episode or previous episode with Victoria Garrick and you loved that episode, you are going to absolutely love this. So without further ado, let's jump right into our episode with Edie. Welcome back to another episode of Drunk Dietitians. Today, I am super excited to have a very, very special guest who is near and dear to my heart, not only a colleague, but also a friend. We have Edith Shreckengast, or you could just say Edie Shreck if we're going off of her Instagram name. She is a board certified specialist in sports dietetics, so CSSD. She's a certified diabetes educator. She just happens to be the sports dietitian for the Mariners, as well as Seton Hill University, with a health at every size focus. I'm going to do some humble bragging for you, Edie, before I let you talk, that she has completed 3 marathons, full marathons, and her best time was 3 hours and 20 minutes, which is absolutely freaking insane. She's done a half marathon at 1 hour and 28 minutes, which is also, I'm like laughing just thinking of my times in my head. Edie has received triathlon collegiate All-American honors in college and came 13th overall female in the 2016 Pittsburgh Marathon. What up, Pittsburgh? I could like brag so much about you, but Edie, I'm just so happy you're here.
I am so excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Of course. And before we got rolling, I said I was going to say this, and Anna's face was like, what are you talking about? So I also would love to share how Edie and I know each other is that we were in the same dietetic internship class at a dietetic internship that doesn't exist anymore. So like, I always joke, I don't even know if I'm a dietitian, like legit. Just kidding. But so at our dietetic internship, we were so lucky to have a badass group of, I think it was 12 of us. And at our Christmas or holiday party, I hosted it at my like home where I grew up, and everyone slept over and we ripped peppermint patty shots in the basement. And Haley Goodrich was also a part of that. So we'll name drop her too.
Yeah, I remember that because I think I had to leave the next day early to go pick up, we went to Ohio Cow Dog Rescue.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that's when I picked up my second dog. His name's Kale, but he was already named that. I just didn't change it. So the next dog I'll probably name it Cupcake or something. But yeah. So I've had Kale since then.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I know you have two dogs right now, right?
Yep. Steely, and she was named after the Steelers. That was my husband's. Naming. And then Kale. And then I want a third one, but that's been nixed, so we can't have a third one.
He's like, nope, you're cut off at two.
Yeah, you got a cat and 2 dogs, you're fine.
Yes. Well, we're really excited for this conversation, and I'm going to actually hand it over to Anna real quick. Anna, when I brought up Edie to you, I want you to just share with everyone listening, like how that came to be and what you asked me, so we can really set that grounding.
Yeah. So I think when I first asked Sammy this question, she didn't hesitate. That she was like, you have to talk to Edie. She was like, hands down, she's the person to go to. Basically, I just came to Sammy and was like, can an intuitive eating approach and health at every size approach like exist in the sports world? Like, and how do you navigate that? And as an RD2B, how do you navigate that like in your journey to like maybe become like, I know, Edie, you're the head dietitian for MLB team right now. Like, how do you apply those principles in a job like at that level?
Totally.
And Sammy didn't hesitate. She was like, oh, I'm just going to email Edie right now. Like, we're going to do drunk dietitians. It's going to be great. And I cannot wait to just hear how you got to where you are today and how you really just stay curious and all of those good things. So I'm super excited to hear all of your answers.
Oh my gosh. I just love that question too. And I think you nailed it. Like, how do you stay curious, right? Because I'm still learning and you're always going to be learning. So I think it's being open to that and knowing that you might not have the answer in that moment. So totally cool.
Yeah. So I think that's like our overarching question for today. But to start, I think, Edie, just like every dietitian, we have this path that gets us to where we are today. So you haven't always been an MLB dietitian, right? You haven't always been necessarily sports specific. So I would love for you to just kind of share from internship, or you can even go back to college or before you knew what you wanted to be when you grew up, like, and you can take as much time. It could be 30 seconds or 30 minutes of just kind of telling your story of like how you got to where you are today as a dietitian.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't think I want to talk about myself for 30 minutes, but yeah, I'll get started. Oh my gosh. So I've always just loved sports in general. I knew I wanted to play some form or participate in some form in sports in high school. And that's actually when I got kind of started in nutrition too. I remember the athletic trainer recommended Nancy Clark's sports nutrition fueling guide, and I got that in high school. And then I went to a D3 school where I ran in college for a couple of years, but I really wanted to become a dietitian and get more invested in that type of field. And so I transferred over to Virginia Tech, and there's really where I think the haze, and I didn't even know it was haze at the time, but just the type of, fueling and eating for pleasure and satisfaction that also yields performance. That really took off for myself at Virginia Tech. I loved working with the sports fueling station there too, the sports nutrition department. We have fantastic dietitian, Jenny. She's consulting, but she was a head dietitian there for a long time. And so then from there, I got my master's in behavioral and community nutrition. And I did a lot working with specific research, wasn't actually sports related, but working with underprivileged or areas where social determinants were a big factor for individuals with pregnancy and also with movement, and trying to do group motivation theory principles. So that was really interesting to work with that population. And then from there, that's where I met Sammy, and we went to the internship in Pittsburgh. And so I've always just loved sports nutrition. And there's not a lot of sports nutrition jobs when you're out, unless you want to take unpaid opportunities, which are fantastic experience opportunities, or you might get some stipends. There's a great Gatorade SNP internship you can apply for that is phenomenal, and that is a stipend. But unfortunately for me, location was critical because I wanted to stay in the Pittsburgh area. So I got a job right after the internship as a outpatient dietitian with Excella Health Hospital System. So it's about 20 to 30 miles outside Pittsburgh. Some of those sites are even 50 miles outside. It's more of a lower income area. And it was phenomenal to work there. So I was there for 4 years, and during that time, the outpatient services didn't see any eating disorders at all, so they'd refer out. So during that time, I was able to develop and implement the first eating disorder outpatient service. And so I also partnered with the sports medicine physician there, the concussion specialist, to offer sports nutrition services. So it was super exciting to develop that and partner with the physician, and then really offer something that, a lot of people didn't have the ability or resource to get down to Pittsburgh. And so making sure that, if there was higher level of care, that we're elevating those individuals that are suffering with eating disorders and not being supported through that. Then also getting all of the athletes in that area too that didn't have education around that. And during that time, I was able to work with Leslie Bonsi. So she's a pretty big heavy hitter for the sports nutrition world. And I just remember working with Pitt with her, with football team, and doing a little bit of the Steelers at that time. So super exciting. And then from there, I really was able to network and connect with different universities. Carnegie Mellon, I worked extensively with. The fun thing with that is doing cooking demos with them. So I did cooking demos with all the athletes, showing them just not, the importance of fueling, but also, all foods fit. So what does that look like? And what resources do you have available to you in the dorm room? Everything's not black and white. So really not just, teaching it or saying it out loud, but then actually showing it through food. So I think that cannot be said enough how important that is. Also worked a little bit with Duquesne, Carlo, Seton Hill, Robert Morris University when I was in Pittsburgh. So connected with all that with sports nutrition consulting, anywhere from one-on-ones, presentations, cooking demos, looking at policies and protocols, all that fun stuff. And then that led me to, we eventually moved for my husband's work. And he works for Brooks Running Company, which is fantastic. And I think it even partners really well with the HAES and intuitive eating, their just motto of run happy. So that resonates with me too. But we came over to Seattle, and I worked a short stint in a food service company. Then I got connected with Seattle University. So I'm their sports consulting dietitian. And then I also, for my day job, get to work, have the privilege to work with Medicaid and Medicare members and offer free nutrition and health coaching services to them. So that's fantastic. And I'm the head sports dietitian at Seattle Mariners. So that's where I am today.
You don't do a lot or anything.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you're not busy. Not a lot. And you made me giggle because I thought back to when I don't remember if that was in our internship or after our internship. Do you remember you and I went to the Steelers training facility and
Yep.
we did a cooking class with the Pitt football team and some grocery store tours. And it was so interesting to gauge their awareness of nutrition. I will never forget one of the football players on the grocery store tour was like, so I heard beer has a lot of protein in it. Like, should I drink beer if I'm going to drink alcohol? And I was like, Lord, we have a lot to talk about.
It was oh my gosh. Yeah. I think I almost saw one cut off his thumb with avocado because he was trying to cut the avocado. I mean, it's stuff like that. And we got photos too, and they were so tall.
Yes. 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 I'll have to pull those photos back up, but that was awesome.
Fun stuff.
Yeah. So you're so entrenched in sport day to day. And so I think really going back to Anna's question, and I know we have a ton of RDs to be that reach out, like even if they're not sport related, but just being like, how do I get into intuitive eating and HAES? But then that sport adds a whole nother element. So how have you, that's a very broad question, but how have you been able to marry these two together and start to apply these approaches?
Such a good question. And it's such a valid question too, because when you're entrenched into the sports world, it's a culture within a culture. So it's a sports culture within our overlining pervasive diet culture, right? So some of that factors kind of leach into the sports culture. And then within that, there's even a sports specific culture. So to marry them, it's kind of bridging the gap. It's essential. So I think as a sports dietitian, I want to help support athletes develop a positive relationship with food. And that only happens when you're utilizing HAES or intuitive eating principles. So it's really, I think to answer that question, the most important question is why HAES, or why health at every size and intuitive eating. And that is because it's the pervasive belief, I believe, that weight and body shape equals performance is so wrong on so many different levels. So our society really praises the athlete that follows that type of principle, and not just principle, but maybe they do restrictive dieting or they have a strict diet, and they praise those type of traits. And I'm kind of going into eating disorders, because those traits are similar to someone that has an eating disorder. For example, they might be perfectionistic, goal-driven, and able to push through pain. So that's some of the same principles that are highly valued in an athlete too. So our job as a sports dietitian, and a dietitian, as a whole, is to help individuals navigate through that static out there that can be really harmful to them, not just as an athlete, but as a human being. Because someday they might not be an athlete or be in that type of sport, but the question is, are they able to have pleasure from movement now? Are they able to have pleasure from food or eating experience, post-collegiate career, post-professional career? And that's, I think, the main reason that we're here to help support the athlete and really tuning into their bodies, what their needs are, and helping them be their body's expert. And that's why I tell my athlete time and time again, you're your body's expert, but sometimes they have to rediscover those food signals of hunger or fullness, or even rediscover joy in movement. They might have really been training for 20 years, in a specific sport, and it's just they're burnt out, or they have to do something versus, they want to, or they get joy from it, or they're looking forward to some part of it. So I think that's where I implement, or try to marry the HAES by working with athletes to develop their own mindfulness skills. And I'm still developing my own mindfulness skills. So it's always, I think we're always in development, which is exciting, And these skills really do offer the athlete valuable feedback, so valuable. So it really helps support them in feeling more in charge and helps them increase, their confidence and their ability to fuel, and not just fuel, but promote practices that really encourage that connection to their mind, body, and their appetite. So, and I know with athletes too, especially as you get higher in intensity of training volume, the appetite can really be suppressed. So that's where it's also our job to guide them in helping them educate on, sports nutrition principles, right, of application to their specific sport, of essential nutrients, timing, fueling, quantity that is needed. But we want to make sure that we're helping them really honor their hunger and making peace with their food, and being able to rediscover that joy in movement again too. A lot of my athletes have maybe lost touch with that, especially towards the end of their career. So the biggest thing or takeaway from that question as a sports RD is, their old bodies are good bodies. And if we don't have that perspective, then that can really transfer to the athlete that we're working with.
Yes. So profound. And I think it's like athletes are humans, right?
Yeah.
Like I think people forget that it's like, this humanizes that. The big questions that come to mind for me too are like, and please tell me if I'm wrong, isn't it like 1 out of every 3 athletes has eating disorder? I believe that.
Yeah, I've seen that statistic, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 5, or it's sports specific too.
Okay.
But we know for a fact athletes are more at risk for eating disorders. Mm-hmm. And in some instances, some sports, some disciplines, that statistic really goes up. And from that too, I wouldn't be surprised 1 out of 3 definitely have disordered eating or eating disorder, or a history of it.
Yes.
So when you're comparing to an average population.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So have you had, I know I had this personally at Penn State when I worked with some of the athletes, like, of course, in sport, predominantly male dominated industry, where people might not have the all bodies are good bodies mentality. Yep. Where do you run into red flags where coach, trainer, whoever says, well, they need to cut this amount of weight or they need to do this, and you're over here in a haze paradigm? So what happens there?
Yeah, I think it's always being always asking questions. Well, why do they need to do that? So finding out where that coach is coming from, but then also not being afraid to educate that coach, because you've sat down hopefully with this athlete and now you're like, this is what I'm recommending and this is why. So this athlete, is now binging and purging. And I do not recommend that we're putting it on him or her on a restrictive diet, because it is affecting their mental health and performance. Like, we should really focus them on developing a meal pattern and reinvestigating pleasure with foods and feelings of fullness, and also checking in with what resources this athlete has, because just because they're an athlete doesn't mean they're going home to a full access to a kitchen or food that is readily available for them to purchase, or foods they like or are comfortable with. So it's kind of redirecting and educating the coaches and staff why you're recommending something, and specifically for that athlete, the importance of it for their health and well-being.
I love that. I'm going to shut up and let Anna ask a question, because I could just keep on going. I love this.
It's we could just talk about that all day, right? Because we're going to get that every single day. You're going to walk in and that's going to be, a referral you receive, or, hey, this athlete's gained 20 pounds and we need to see him cut. I had a similar thing right at Excella too, with the awesome sports physician. There's another fellow who's like, yeah, this athlete's doing really good. He cut 15 pounds from the weight he had gained. Meanwhile, when I met with him, he had bulimia, and as a freshman, he really struggled with his mental health and got injured, and then really utilized very harmful practices to see that, but was praised when he walked back into the office and cleared. So that was a point, an educational point on my part. where I was able to take that physician, our fellow, and go, hey, this is a conversation we had, and that's very negative. When you're praising an athlete's weight, it was very negative for that athlete's headspace. So next time, that might be a red flag that we want to not say, hey, good job on X, Y, and Z, or the specific number, but utilize it as a teaching opportunity to ask questions, what's going on.
Yeah.
So
as
important.
Jenna would say, so many golden nuggets.
Mhm.
Jenna says that every podcast, like everything that you said, Edie, just was so powerful. Like, and especially for athletes, like your life after being an athlete, like that is so important to like teaching them skills like during their time with you that will carry on past like their athletic career. And I would love for you to kind of expand more on that, like what skills or like just tools do you make sure to like educate your athletes on to help prepare them for like after their career? Because I by no means was a collegiate athlete. I played sports in high school, but even going into college, I felt that post-athlete, like, okay, like I need to navigate food and like joyful movement. And I by no means played on a collegiate scale at all. So I can only imagine like college athletes or pro athletes like that after like and navigating that. So love to hear.
My gosh, yes, totally. I love this question because I feel like that's our job too, right? Oh my gosh. Because the coaches, staffing, there's fantastic coaches and staffing and support systems out there, and sports medicine team that I work with, they're phenomenal. And so being able to be a part of that has been amazing. But also, if it's a disservice to the athlete if we're not also making sure that we're giving skill sets that are sustainable post-collegiate career, post-professional career, post-high school career, right? And so all that is so important. So when I'm working with the athlete and I'm sitting down with them and I'm like, hey, so I want to check in with what are their thoughts and feelings around food? For example, what's their favorite food and are they restricting it now and why? And then it's an opportunity to help guide them through that kind of our diet culture, right? Good, bad foods. If you eat a bad food, you're bad, right? If you eat a good food, you're good. So you're a good athlete. So it's really breaking down that type of structure in their mind to have where, food is fuel, but not just that. There's so much more to it. It's pleasure, right? It gives you social interactions. And I want to make sure that they're being able to be flexible in the sports space, that they can then go on and use that flexibility with their food and body post-athletic career, where they can go for, because I've always been a runner, but I can go for a run and be okay if I don't get my 3 miles in, or I walked during it. And then they're not justifying their workout to their value and what they can eat afterwards. So really dialing in on that early in their career or whenever I'm able to get them to set them up with that type of skill set. Because that's so important, often forgotten, right? Because we have all these other external cues saying we have to get this athlete to this place. We want to make sure, maybe it's their last year, that they have their best year yet, or they're freshmen and they're struggling, and we want to elevate them from their high school performance.
Yeah, it's so common. And we had, do you know Victoria Garrick by any chance?
I do not.
Okay, so we had her on. I'll have to send you our podcast we did with her, but she played at USC. She played volleyball, and she has a nonprofit called The Hidden Opponent, and she did some work with Kobe Bryant before he passed on his book. But she talks about mental health with athletes, and just that's what she brings awareness to. And so much of this is kind of I want to say exactly what we talked about with her, but it's a very coupled episode to that. And I've seen it. I have so many, post athletes that now I'm going to use like air quotes. They're normal people. They've always been normal people, but it's that struggle of like, what is my purpose now? What is my body if it's not this machine? What is, what is food if it's not fueling a workout? Do I even deserve it? Like I've had people ask those questions. And so it's so so important.
Oh, for sure. And it's been ingrained into them so early, especially if they started the sport. And the trend in America has been very one sport specific. You get them in young and they go through that to get that elite level. And even just if you're just doing it for fun, high school level too, it's that ingrained into that kind of culture of, this is what I need to be doing. This is how I value myself. And it's actually, there's so many other things besides that sport that you can get pleasure from, and rediscovering that and rediscovering yourself. Because we start, I think of it as like a self-identity. So in college, early high school, college, you really develop your kind of own self-identity, but then we also have a sports self-identity. So is that overriding your self-identity as a whole? When you're post career, and how can we help marry those two together, where you're in a place that that is neutral to where you can work to a positive place.
Yeah, love that. I know this one question I'm very excited to ask you, just because we talked about it previously, kind of the weight standards also, and like just the diet talk, and like in a perfect world, like if we could remove weight standards from performance, like how do you think this would affect athletes? Because I just thinking of removing, just eat this, not that, you can't have that because you'll gain X amount of pounds. Like if we could just remove all of that talk completely, in my mind, I'm just like, if I did this when I was in high school, I feel like I would have enjoyed sports like 10 times better, because I'm not focusing on what I look like. I'm focusing on performing. And I can only imagine if you could just remove those standards completely and just focus on performance, that would change. It would change the game for sports.
It would change the world. Yeah. Mental health would be so improved, but not just that, physical health, right? I love every question, but this question is very special. So I think one of the biggest, I'll give an example. So I'm not sure if you heard, but of Mary Kane, but she is a phenom track athlete. I started watching her back when she was in high school, and she was competing against pros and winning. So she was a prodigy. 2013, she really had a come out year. And she came out with a video last year that I think everyone, Google it, definitely watch it, and it hits all points of your question. So it's Mary Kane's story. I was the fastest girl in America until I joined Nike. So she was the youngest track and field athlete to make a world championship team. I mean, just that alone, I mean, your mind is like, but yeah, so when she joined that team, the same type of principle, it was hounded on her, and she says in the video, and I don't do justice what she says, but thinness was ideal. She was just hounded to lose weight. Thinner is better. I mean, the coach would yell at her if he thought she had gained weight right before a race in front of other runners. She would be weighed in front of her team. Those type of very, very unhealthy behaviors really lead to underfueling and lost a menstrual cycle for her for 3 years, and that can really lead to REDS, which is relative energy deficiency in sport. And it's so harmful for the athlete. I think it's really counterculture to fuel appropriately, not just as an athlete, but as a human being, right? So, and for that, what REDS really signifies is low energy availability. It can have hormonal disturbances, loss of muscle mass. I mean, you increase fatigue, injury, suboptimal bone density, so you can increase risk for stress fractures. If I have a female athlete or male athlete that's restricting, they're 3 to 5 times more likely to get a stress fracture. It impairs your training adaptations, a prolonged injury recovery process. And so that's where, to answer that question, it can be triggered by having such a huge emphasis on weight and how important that is to the athlete's ability, when that is a specific number that might not tell you anything, right? Especially to how that athlete's doing, being, and living.
Mic drop.
So
Yeah.
good. So good.
Yeah.
If only you could just be the dietitian for every athlete in America, that would
Oh gosh.
be amazing. You're like,
I
do
don't
that.
have
Don't
time.
make me do that.
Oh man, but it's supported though, especially back to Mary Kane. You know, she that messaging was supported. It was ingrained. The coach really supported that. They listened, and there was no ability in that situation to deviate, or you had to leave the team. So that's the sports culture that she was really in. It really sends a strong message to the athlete, a very unhealthy message. And she got out, which is, I mean, just the resilience to do that is amazing.
Yeah.
So my head goes like, I'm sure you've had, you have, like we've talked about already, like maybe coaches coming at you with like, they need to lose this amount of weight or this % body fat or whatever. You might have parents. Do you ever have parents of your athletes coming at you and saying like, what do you mean they can have a donut? Or like, do you get that? Or how does that family dynamic work?
Totally. Totally get that. Especially, I think for some of the sports I've talked about too, that you have that at a very early age. The parents can be very, very invested in their son, daughter, or child, where they're like, no, this is what they should be eating. This is what they should be doing, and it's really education. Really trying to use the evidence-based science to say, yeah, no, that's not appropriate. Like we need fueling, we need a sustainable fueling, and we need enough fueling. Under fueling can really have metabolic damage, but not just that, to mental health too, and really emphasize that. So I think that's where, when you're looking with the lens of athletic context, less does not mean better, right? Thinner does not equal faster, because that can really create eating disorder like behavior patterns or development of an eating disorder that is lifelong, that can be lifelong if not treated appropriately. And so there's really important with, especially any athlete, any individual, that we're highlighting, hey, this is the research, but also this is a human being, and these are principles we can use post-collegiate career or post-athletic career, or even right now, that supports them. So I think just really reviewing the emphasis of that, and you're going to be saying it time and again, but you can shift, you can educate, and sometimes you're going to have to agree to disagree with someone, especially when they're ingrained or entrenched into that type of diet culture.
Mm-hmm. That is where my next question comes up, is like, how do you take care of you? Because every answer you've given is like, I have to educate, I have to ask questions. Like it's almost like you can't, I don't want to say you can't do your job, because of course you're killing it, but it's like, you're getting questioned on everything you're applying when you're like, no, this is what it is. So how do you, like, what do you do for your mental health?
Yeah.
Like,
oh
how
my
do
gosh,
you
I
show up every day and do that?
And be okay. Yeah. Like, yeah, I'm going to, fight today. No, I think first it's good to do your own work too, and to have mentors, and individuals that you reach out to and have that discussion and peer support. So I'm always going to be doing work on myself. And I think that's one thing that's really helped, to be that grounded, to find your own food, peace, and body imagery work too. So it's really, I've worked on my foundation, right? And you're always going to have cracks, or something comes up where you might have to rebuild a foundation. But to have that foundation is where you're able to then explore and educate with individuals that might not be where you're at. And that's totally okay. Mental health side of things, very good support system at home. And I love my doggies. So I really do, love to be able to have the opportunity and privilege to go for a run and get joy from that. I had competed at a pretty high level at Tech, in triathlons, and was All-American in that. And from that space too, I had one of the best coaches I'll probably ever have in my life. He made me feel, Jim McGehee with one-on-one endurance, he made me feel support as an athlete, but not just as a person. So he really was a significant figure that he didn't even know it helped develop that space where I could explore HAES and intuitive eating, because he supported me not as an athlete, but as an individual. So I didn't have the type of toxic messaging that you see often.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I also love that you went to Virginia Tech, because I told Sammy when she told me, she's like, oh yeah, she went to Virginia Tech. My whole family is like Hokie fans. Like my parents are from Virginia. I was born in Florida, raised in Florida. I'm not like an FSU, UF fan. Like I'm a Virginia Tech fan.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like, yes.
Go Hokies. I would always say that during our internship.
Yes. Like she would literally like somewhere like in a study, they'd be like, I'm from Virginia Tech. And we'd be like in class and Edie would be like, go Hokies. And I was like, what is she doing?
Like when I see people like with shirts down here, like casually, they'll be walking back from the beach or something, be like, go Hokies. Like they'll look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm just like, you don't understand. Like it's foreign in Florida to see somebody with Virginia Tech here. So like, I just love that even more. Like part about you is like Virginia Tech certified. Like there we go.
Yeah, Hokie raised. So
yes, I love that. And thank you for sharing that, like, you know, what you're working on personally, because I think that's something I've definitely chatted about in previous episodes. I feel like I do literally say Haley's name every episode. She's probably like, stop talking about me, but because of her, like, and, you know, and her, like the Well Seek and their whole like group of being able to get support, and whoever, you know, whoever you're seeking that additional supervision from, because that's something that any RDs to be that are listening, or even dietitians, like we're not mandated to have supervision. So if you're just out there on your own thinking you need to have all the answers and know all the things and be doing all the things, like that's hard, and that leads to burnout. So being able to have people that you turn to and you trust and you look up to, that you can unload some of this with, is so important.
Oh, it's huge. It's so huge. Yeah, because we're not always going to know the answer, and I don't always know the answer, and being open to that and not going knee jerk, I have to dictate or tell the right answer right away. You know, and just being open to explore. I mean, having that, and also setting your own boundaries, so important. So important. And we're going to have good days and bad days. Like, you know, I talked about this like foundation, right? Well, sometimes my foundation has a little crack in it, you know, and I have to do some self work or take a break and work on that. So,
question for both Sammy and you, Edie.
Love it. Yeah.
I just love that there's 3 people out of your internship group that have now, like, just as a professional, are like intuitive eating, like health at every size, like just like ingrained. Like, what do you think was different, like for you guys, or how do you think, like, I just think it's huge that 3 of you guys, you started off like your journey. There's 5
now that I know of. There might be more. I'm thinking Brianna, JC, they're both HAES. Casey's HAES, that's 6.
Yeah.
That's like, what do you think was different? Like, I just think that's amazing.
It wasn't our internship, I'll tell you.
I know, like, there
definitely
was
not
that group for sure, because I mean, like, powerhouses were like born out of that internship group. It was, what were those shots that you made, Sammy? Those peppermint patty?
It had to be the peppermint patty shots in my basement.
That's my answer. Peppermint patty shot, definitely, 100%.
It is true though. I do look back on our internship and I'm like, holy shit, like I can't imagine going through a different internship. But I think I know for me personally, and I've shared this on our previous episode, it was a culmination. Definitely, I would say Haley and you were kind of like, I would say the first that I recognized. But when Haley switched over from Excella to her private practice with intuitive eating and HAES, I was like, I don't even know what this is. I've never heard of this. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to her and I was like, what is this? Like, tell me more. And then that hit the ground running for me. But how about, like, because you said in college with running that you had exposure. Did you know what intuitive eating was before Adagio?
No, but I was applying the principles. So
without knowing.
Yeah. And I think that really, applying some of the principles, because I know in college, you know, I had a lot of injuries in college when I was running, and I underfueled, lost my menstrual cycle unintentionally, had a bone, you know, a stress fracture. That really led me to explore. And then when I was at Virginia Tech, just exploring the concept of, you know, fueling appropriately without the diet mindset of, you know, why did I try to track my calories before? You know, like, why? I mean, that's what we're taught in college, right? But no, like, I don't got time for that. That's boring. Like, that's not pleasurable. You know, eating to have fun. And I know at one time in my master's, it was a $5 you get in beer garden. And for those beer drinkers, I'm so sorry, I don't drink beer. I love wine. I can do wine all day, but all you can eat pizza. And I had done a couple slices of pizza, no big deal. And then the graduate student, PhD student commented, you know, I didn't expect you to eat that pizza. And I was like, what do you mean? It's dinner time. I paid for it. Like, am I not going to eat? And she's like, no, you're just, you know, you're in nutrition and you're an athlete. And I was like, well, this is dinner and I paid for it and I love pizza. So yeah, and I think it's really, it really just applies to my everyday during really exploring, like, yeah, I'm not going to be worried or fixated on my weight, even though the message, or I'm going to try not to, even though the toxic messaging is out there. So yeah, I think that really helped develop, I think, my own self-identity. And yeah, like, I'm going to go have fun. I'm going to work as hard as I can, but I'm also going to have as much fun as I can and fuel and try to eat appropriately and, you know, eat what I want, when I can. So yeah.
I love that you brought that back to self-identity and some of the, you know, things you mentioned, whether it's like calorie counting on, you know, tracking. When we look at these disordered eating behaviors, like, if people just really slow down and ask themselves, like, do I enjoy doing this? It's like, I think that can be so clear, but I think what's hard is that so many people, they are a little detached from their self-identity because of diet culture and the external influences of it. But yeah, it's, if we just slow down and say, like, do I enjoy this? Yeah. If the answer is no, back to curiosity, why are we doing it? And we know, all three of us here, that the research also shows not only is it not enjoyable, but it's definitely not impacting our health in a positive way. So if that was the motivator of trying to be, air quotes, healthy, it's not helping that or achieving that.
Yeah.
So
good.
Totally. And because I went from, you know, collegiate running to then triathlons, in that triathlon space with that specific coach. Jim was a phenomenal space to explore that, because he really supported the holistic whole person as an athlete, and huge proponent of fueling with enough energy, when prior at CNU, the emphasis was more on performance. You got to perform. You got to do what it takes to get the job done.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've seen it I'm not going to name universities because I don't want to get in trouble with certain things that I disclose, but I've seen track coaches force vegan diets on the whole team.
Yep.
Come in and say you have to lose a certain % body fat, when girls already had lost their menstrual cycle and are withering away, and, you know, their mental health is suffering. So there's a lot. You are so needed in sport, Edie, and we are so appreciative of you coming and sharing your gifts with us. And I hope this message will reach thousands and thousands of people, and I hope they can continue to share it with friends and athletes and active folk who just need to hear this, because so many people need this message.
Oh my gosh, right back at you. So, and it's so pervasive too. I had an athlete recently tell me how her gyno, and we've been working for a while together. Well, not a while, but 4 to 5 months for her to regain her period and refeed. And she was in such a great space. And then she set up the gyno appointment with this new gynecologist to, hey, why haven't I gained my period back? And it's like, yeah, we can get that checked in. That's good. It's still probably going to take time since you hadn't had it for, 2 years. But the gynecologist told her, well, like most professional runners don't have periods. So, I mean, it's just that type of messaging, not just from coaching, but from also, healthcare provider is out there and happening daily. That this happened a couple months ago. So it's something that we always need to be aware of. And go, hey, no, that is inaccurate.
Yeah.
First of all, you're not working with a professional athlete. Second of all, that's still not good for a professional athlete. Like,
Yeah.
So that's a no. Like, so many other things are going on to where the athlete isn't able to support a functioning period. So it's like, we got to get back to that period.
Mm-hmm. No pun intended.
Yeah, I know.
But that's why I asked you that question of boundaries and your mental health, because I can't imagine, like, fighting diet culture is fucking hard, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is, it's so hard. And so being in that space, but then, like you said, having the sport culture attached to it, like, that's why I'm like, that's like having like 2 walls falling on you at once instead of just one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that, like, breathing, after you get off the phone with that gynecologist, you can just MF them and then, take some breaths, and then just get back to it. But you're right. It's everywhere. It's family, it's friends, it's diet culture, it's medical professionals, it's coaching. And so that's why these messages are so important, to make sure we get them in the hands or the ears of as many people as possible, for sure. Before we wrap up here, Anna, I'm going to hand it over to you. Any last burning questions on your end?
I think the last question I have is just, what's your biggest piece of advice for, like, an RD2B that wants to pursue sports, like, with an intuitive eating, health at every size approach? And maybe for, like, an athlete too, like, if you're an athlete and you want to take that approach and want to focus not on your weight, you just want to simply focus on performance, like, what would be your biggest advice for navigating that space of intuitive eating and health at every size for just the setting of sports?
Another really good question. I love it. Okay. I'll start with the athlete first. Definitely getting people on your team, so that support your goals, that support that. HAES and intuitive eating. So there's so much more HAES, intuitive eating practitioners out there, therapists. I know the eating disorder OPO that we refer to here in Seattle is HAES and intuitive eating aligned. So having those type of resources on your side, and then also, being okay to explore and not know the answers. A lot of times with athletes that can be tough because they're very goal driven. So you give them a set of requirements, or they want specific requirements versus guidelines for different scenarios, and so they want to go with it. So it's being okay to have time to explore those different concepts for them, for sure. But number one, having an appropriate treatment team on your side. So the appropriate messaging and being supported as an athlete, for sure. RDs to be, you guys rock. So you guys are phenomenal. Oh my gosh, yeah. So power to you. Another big thing too, it's the same type of principle. Making sure that you're reaching out to mentors and knowing that that it's okay not to know the answer. It's okay to actually have a voice too. So not being held back or afraid based on your experience level. If there's someone that's been several more years in the field, because you have your own lived experience, and that is just as important. So don't be afraid to use your voice.
That's huge. I love that. Yeah. We're going to make that our I'm going to call it our nutrition tipsy of the day. We always leave listeners with like one big burning piece of info. And I think that is so, so important.
Sammy, we didn't do rapid fire with Edie.
I thought about that.
Are we getting to that?
I thought about that, but we just like jumped right in because we were so excited.
I love it.
I'm thinking maybe we'll switch it up and we'll end with rapid fire. Okay. And then we'll sign off. So we'll take it right into that. So Edie,
Yeah.
Tequila or vodka?
Ooh, tequila.
Awesome. Same.
Yeah.
I was going to say wine or beer, but you already shared that with us on this episode.
I'll go all the way Malbec. I love a good Malbec.
Malbec.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Do you like soft shell or hard shell taco?
Ooh, soft shell. You can double shell it. Yeah.
Just give me all the crunch. All the crunch. Yeah. Let's see what else. Netflix and chill or night out on in the town?
Oh, Netflix and chill.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm like trying to answer them for you to see if I know you. Okay, the cats and dogs is one of them.
Oh, definitely dogs. Because of my doggies, but I love our cat too. She's special, but she acts more like a dog, but dogs.
Okay, perfect. This is a big one between myself and our other co-host Jenna, who's usually here. Do you like crunchy or smooth peanut butter?
Oh, smooth.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Has to be smooth.
Okay.
I'm team crunchy, so
really?
Technically there's a tie here.
That's fair.
Jenna.
Yeah. You with Jenna. And then the last question for you, Edie, is that if you could have one thing in the world in limitless quantities, but it can't be money, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. This is such a good one. I think I would definitely have like animals.
Yes.
I would rescue all the animals.
Oh, I love that. That just speaks to your personality and your character. And I love you so much. Okay, so last question, which is super simple. For anybody who's listening to this and they're like, I need to talk to Edie, I want to get in touch with her. What is the best way for them to reach you on social, email?
Yeah.
You go ahead and put it out there for them.
Yeah, totally. So they can definitely email me. And it's Edith, EDITH, Nault, NAULT 1 @gmail.com. I also have Instagram. I check that most of the time, so I'm pretty good with that, but it's Speedy EDRD. And those are the two ways that you can reach out to me. So
awesome. We will definitely make sure we will link your social media as well as the Mary Kane video in our show notes so people can click right over to that. But
and I can send that to you now.
Yes, I'm sure if I Google that, but I actually think I've seen that. But
it's a really good video.
Yes. Yeah. But thank you so much for everything. We appreciate everything that you've said, and so excited to share this with so many people.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I had a blast. So you guys rock.
Guys, thank you so much for listening and being here with us. I am virtually cheersing all of you. We absolutely loved sipping on a cocktail with you and sharing as many nutrition tipsies as possible during this episode. We know there are a ton of pods out there, and we are so appreciative of your time that you spent listening to us today. Please be sure to check out the show notes for episode details and all of our guest information. We promise to keep bringing you the best and the most knowledgeable and fun guests we possibly can. Please be sure to subscribe, like, share, and post if you enjoyed our content today. And visit us on Instagram and Facebook at Drunk Dietitians to find out what is up next for us on the pod. We absolutely love you. We appreciate you and can't wait to spend more time cheersing with you soon.